what you need to know about Fusion. Let's start with the history. It all comes down to an album that Miles Davis made called Bitches Brew. Okay? And this album had a variety of cats on it, and he had a variety of cats that he worked with, and those guys ended up going off and all doing their own things, making their own bands, which ended up being like band pillars of Fusion. But this album in particular, it was like, I don't know, it went like gold or platinum or something, which was like 4 times more successful than his other works. So it popped off for him, but it was also met with criticism because he was basically trying to mix like R&B and backbeat type grooves with jazz, and that was kind of like a faux pas, like a no-no. So it's also called jazz rock, so that's like also what Fusion can be called. So from Bitches Brew is the birth of Fusion, and then there's bands that come out of that by way of, well, who was he working with? He was working with Chick Corea, all right? And what did Chick Corea form? He formed Return to Forever, and Return to Forever had not only Chick Corea, but Lenny White and Al Di Meola, which are badass motherfuckers, okay? Those are Banffs. And who else? John McLaughlin. Anybody know? And let's see if I can do this right. McLaughlin. John McLaughlin made what? He made Mahavishnu Orchestra. And who did Mahavishnu Orchestra have in it? Billy Cobham, one of the greatest of all time. Alright, who else was working with Miles Davis? The late, great Tony Williams. All drummers should know who Tony Williams, Billy Cobham, and Lenny White are. If you don't, you are in serious trouble, because these guys are massive sources of inspiration for basically all the greatest drummers. So, you know, if you're missing that key, it's going to be hard to unlock things in your playing. Okay, Tony Williams made what? Lifetime. Alright, check that record out. It's got Protocosmos on it. Fred. Those are the 2 most iconic in my opinion. And who was Tony Williams working with on this record? He was working with a little guy by the name of Alan Holdsworth.
Love Alan Holdsworth.
He's incredible.
He's insane.
He's amazing. And to think that you lived most of your life up until a couple of years ago
I know.
without hearing it.
I didn't know who he was until you showed me. I live with regret.
So like now you're getting a sense for like, I mean, even Stanley Clarke went off and did his own thing, creating Fusion. Al Di Meola did the same. I mean, John McLaughlin to this day, you know, he's still making Fusion. Billy Cobham ended up making his own band. So like all these, it's this huge network of guys that really started from Miles. Next we have Herbie Hancock. All these guys are prolific, okay? So like every single one of these guys is prolific. What did he make? What band did he make? Headhunters. Okay? Who did that have in it? Harvey Mason, another great funk. If you like great feel, great sound, yeah, great timing, funky playing, musical. It's Harvey Mason. Who else? I think those are pretty much the pillars, and then from them, all these guys came. And then, of course, Chick Corea had Electric Band too, and then from that, Dave Weckl was in the Electric Band, and then who was in Electric Band 2? It was Gary Novak. So also some of the greatest drummers alive have played with Chick Corea. In my opinion, I put Chick first because he's always got the best drummers. Steve Gadd, Vinnie Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, who else did I say? Gary Novak, Tom Breckline too. He's always working with incredible drummers. And then, Billy Cotton, all these guys are incredible. So fusion, the reason why it's so important, I think, for drummers to know fusion is because it's like kind of the mixing of the finessed jazz, technicality, and also there's a spirit of jazz as well, and improvising, and then mixing that with the power of rock, the backbeat and groove of rock, the ability of that to penetrate the normie brain, we'll say. And some other great fusion guys to mention that I don't think Frank Zappa worked with Miles, but I don't know. But Frank Zappa also always has incredible drummers playing with him. And who played with Frank Zappa that is another kind of pillar of fusion? George Duke. So, if you don't understand the history of fusion as a drummer, now you do. And hopefully you go investigate. Return to Forever, that first album, Romantic Warrior, Mahavishnu Orchestra, there's a lot of stuff to sift through. And you kind of just it's weird because it's, you've got John McLaughlin playing stuff he's very influenced by Indian, and then there's a violin player, and Billy's smashing the drums, and then Jan Hammer's an organ player, keys player. So it's weird, And speaking of weird, Frank Zappa's weird too. So there's definitely albums that, and Chick has so many albums. It's kind of tough to say which ones are the best ones, but Electric Band is probably, that's a safest place to start. But yeah, of course there's going to be, some stuff in there that's just weird, and you're like, I don't know, it's music,
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. But again, it's exploratory, so take that into consideration. Keep an open mind. But there it is, History of Fusion. So I do have a playlist. It's called Garska's Jam, and it's on Spotify. And it's got Tony Williams on there, Dennis Chambers, all sorts of stuff. Hadrian Farad. Now vs. Now, that Alan Holdsworth, Chick Corea, a bunch of the guys I mentioned in there are in this playlist. So check that out. Frank Zappa, Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, Hog Heaven. Check it out.